Mankind is rapidly developing robots that can make the decision to apply lethal force. And when that moment comes, when robots can decide who and when to kill, it will bring about a power shift in which autonomous Terminators will be fighting our wars.
They'll never make ethical decisions. Make their share of mistakes, whether based upon faulty data sets or bad programming. And they'll kill by mistake sometimes, or they'll kill the wrong person. And unlike a human being, they'll never regret it.
Which raises the question, what happens when robots become smarter than us?
You're listening to Canary Cry Radio. Here's Basil and Gonz.
Hey everyone, welcome to Canary Cry Radio. My name's Basil.
And this is Gonz. Welcome to episode number 67.
67.
And we have a very interesting conversation for you guys today.
Yes, very interesting indeed.
Is there anything we want to touch on before we jump into it, Basil?
No, well, I mean, this is just a very, very mind-melting conversation. Very good. I enjoyed it a lot. Just keep in mind, and we'll get into this more in the interview, but this guy is a very learned man and is semi-well known within the transhumanist sort of, I don't know, conversation. It is not technically a Christian, but again, we'll get into that more in the conversation. Yeah. So, yeah, just be ready to expand your scientific view of the universe. You'll notice that the sound quality on this episode is a little bit different than many of our episodes from the past, and that is because our guest is in China, and China apparently is very hard to get a good connection to America over the internet for reasons that are also addressed in the podcast. So you will hear the sound quality be a little bit less than usual, but just bear with us, and I promise that it'll be worth it.
I'm going to sound crystal clear just because I'm special.
Okay.
Dr. Hugo de Garis sounds like he's on a phone, and Basil sounds like you're going to be on a phone. So yeah, it's really just you guys. I'm fine.
Okay, well, there you go. So you guys got everything you need. You got the crystal clear vibrations of Gonz's soothing voice in your ear, and me and our guest will sound like we're on a telephone.
Rotary phone.
Just to reiterate everything you just said. Okay, here we go.
All right. Our guest today is Professor Hugo de Garis. He's an Australian native and a researcher in a subfield of artificial intelligence known as evolvable hardware. He became known in the 90s for his research on the use of genetic algorithms to evolve neural networks using three-dimensional cellular automata inside field programmable gate arrays. Whatever that means. Maybe we'll find out. He claimed that this approach would enable the creation of what he terms artificial brains, which would quickly surpass human levels of intelligence. He has a PhD from Brussels University, Belgium, and he's written 2 books, Multis and Monos, What the Multicultured Can Teach the Monocultured Towards the Growth of a Global State, and the more fascinating one that I think we'll talk about today, The Artilect War, Cosmists versus Terrans, a bitter controversy concerning whether humanity should build godlike, massively intelligent machines. It's an honor to have Professor Hugo de Garis on Canary Cry Radio. Hey, Hugo, how you doing?
Yeah. Hi, Gonz and Basil?
Yep, that's us. So how you doing over there in China right now?
It's 2 a.m. in the morning. That's fine for me because I'm a night person. I'm retired, and I do what I like, and I like the peace of the night. So I'll be awake until probably about 6 a.m. Then I go to sleep.
You're a madman.
I'm free.
And just so everybody knows here on the show, we have been trying to get a clear connection with Dr. Hugo for
good 48 hours now. That we've been trying.
And, Yeah, and we've had fractions of this conversation at least once before, and so we're just gonna keep on trucking, and you guys can listen in, and here we go. Okay, so Dr. Hugo, why don't you start out by just giving us a little bit about your background and what you do, and what kind of, I don't know, Chinese food you like to eat, things like that.
Okay, well, I'm 67. I've been retired for 4 years. I've been living in China for about 8 years. The place is a shithole. I grew up in Australia, and then England, Holland, Belgium, Japan, America, and China. So I label myself a multi, meaning multicultured. Why China? Why? Well, a couple of years before I retired, I was starting to build China's first artificial brain. So that was my specialty in the general field of artificial intelligence. And I would evolve neural networks. So they behave sort of like brain cells, but in electronic form. And I would evolve in a kind of Darwinian way in electronics, the connections between these brain cells. And the ones that by chance performed well, they survived, and the ones that didn't, well, they got killed off. So using supercomputers, I could evolve neural net circuits that perform quite well. I mean, they'd see things, and they'd recognize words and make decisions, and so put tens of thousands of these evolved circuits together and make artificial brains.
Wow.
And then I started getting ambitious and thinking, hey, there's real potential in this. Let me try and persuade the Chinese, the equivalent of in the US of state government. They're called provinces here. So I started politicking a bit, and I think I made a mistake. I thought I had the personal confidence of the president of my university, but he turned out to be a real commie. I was telling him, look, you're not going to get large numbers of Westerners until China democratizes. And the next thing I know, I'm fired.
Wow.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it is. It's a shithole. Anyway, so in some ways it was a blessing in disguise, because then I started... I became free. I realized I had enough money from my pension that when I was a prof in America, that was in Utah. So I was at one of the state universities. So I started doing some math, back of the envelope type calculations, and hey, I could afford to retire, because the cost of living in China is something like, well then, about 7 times cheaper. So I said, yeah, I could retire. So I did. And then I completely switched careers. I went out of brain building and back to my first love, which was math and physics. In the 70s, I was a grad student in math and physics in London under a famous professor. But there were no jobs, because I'm a baby boomer, 67, so I was born 2 years after the end of World War II. And so all those undergrads, my age, the people who taught them, those profs were quite young. A lot of them had been hired because there's such a mass influx of university students of my age then. So there are no vacancies, right? These guys wouldn't retire for decades. So it dawned on me I was never going to get a job, so I'd have to move into something else. So I chose artificial intelligence, which struck me as fascinating, because how on earth would you get a machine to be intelligent, to remember things and understand things and see things and talk and all that stuff, and behave in a way that if human beings did the same thing, people would say, oh, that's intelligent. So
right.
I got into that. And then bit by bit, gradually, it wasn't a sudden thing, but I became more and more conscious that, my God, the potential of these machines in the future with rapidly advancing technologies, especially one phenomenon called Moore's Law. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, it's a part of general education nowadays, I guess. So for those who don't know, Moore's Law is it's based on Gordon Moore. he was one of the founders of the famous microchip company Intel that everyone's heard of. And he noticed in the mid-'60s that the number of transistors you could cram onto a chip was doubling pretty well every year or two. And so I started doing some maths, and I thought, my God, I mean, pretty soon, by around the year 2020, you'll have the computing capacity will be vastly superior to what the human brain can do. In fact, literally 2013, 2014, the state-of-the-art supercomputers now have more or less an equal processing ability, in other words, in bits of information per second,
right,
as the human brain.
Wow.
Our supercomputers have now equaled, at least in bits per second, not in intelligence yet, but at least in bits per second, we're now equal to the human brain.
right.
And of course, we'll sail on way past what the human brain can do. With this doubling keeps occurring every year or so. So then I start calculating. Well, my God, what if if you heard of nanotechnology,
Mm-hmm.
Molecular scale machines, little tiny robots the size of molecules, nanotech.
Sure. Yeah. We actually did an episode. We interviewed a nanoscientist a couple episodes ago, so we're very fresh on our I guess nanotech.
Jive.
Okay. Well, so then sitting in the park a couple of years back, this is in China, I asked myself the question, well, if I took just a single grain of sand and nanoteched it in such a way that on just one atom I could manipulate one bit of information, so have the atom change, oscillating back and forth between excited state, not excited, not excited, and so on. It could flip back and forth in a femtosecond. It's a thousandth of a trillionth of a second. And it's not too difficult. You can estimate how many atoms there'd be in that little grain of sand, that cubic millimeter.
Right.
And eventually I worked out the computing capacity of that nanotech single grain of sand would outperform the human brain equivalent, information processing rate of the human brain by a factor of something like a quintillion, like a million trillion times. And that just sort of hit me. I thought, oh my God! I mean, if human beings in the future, if you heard of cyborgs, another technical, you know what a cyborg is?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so well, again, for listeners who don't know, a cyborg, that's short for cybernetic organism. In other words, part machine, part human. So a human being, for example, who starts adding this little grain of sand that's been nanotech to their human brain, if they did that, strictly speaking, they'd be a cyborg, but in practice, they would be almost pure machine, because this little grain of sand would outperform the human brain by a factor of a quintillion, a million trillion times. So that cyborg would be 99.9999999% machine, and only 0.00001% human, right?
Wow.
So that really hit home to me at an emotional level, and I thought, oh my God, this technological capacity is so vast that it's only a question of time before humanity is going to have to face up to the writing on the wall.
Sure.
Right.
And ask ourselves, are we, when I say we, I mean the human species, are we going to remain the dominant species, or will we let our machines take over? And if they do take over, they could take over massively. We're not talking about like a machine that's like twice as intelligent as a human being, or 5 times or 10 times. Try a trillion times greater.
Right. When you say take over, do you mean like in a military robot army sense, or just like a intellectual sense?
All of the above. So, I was thinking along these lines, maybe not as explicitly with those huge numbers, but certainly along those lines in the 80s. And so eventually I thought, well, look, I should put these ideas on paper. So I wrote a book late 80s. And at that stage, when I was writing it, I felt like a weirdo. There may be 2 or 3 other people on the planet having similar ideas. And then the title of that book was called The Artilect War. And I'd explain this term, Artilect. It's short for artificial intellect. So an artificial mind, or an artificial brain, or an artificial intelligence. They're all much the same thing. And the book was called The Artilect War. And I was predicting that when push really comes to shove, when whole industries start making highly intelligent artificial brains which control home robots and zillions of other applications, but particularly home robots, when millions, if not billions of people in a decade or so from now, and maybe even less, when their home robots start closing I call it the IQ gap, that's the intelligence gap between human level and machine level, when that gap really starts to close, then people will start getting alarmed. You can imagine every year or 2 or 3, they will update their home robot. And because it's such a huge industry, there'll be an enormous number of researchers and professors and engineers and people thrown at the problem to improve the product every year. So every time someone goes out and buys the next version of their home robot, they're going to notice how much smarter it is compared to their previous version. The vocabulary will be richer, and it'll have a sense of humor and cynical, and it can do more tasks, and it'll wisecrack and so on. And so human beings, at first, they'll be amused and amazed and say, "Oh, my home robot's great," But as the IQ gap closes, like when it starts having the intelligence of like a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, then all that amusement and bemusement will shift to a growing anxiety. People start becoming worried. They'll see the writing on the wall,
right?
And then you got lots of professors and researchers saying, "Oh, that's nothing. You wait." And they'll trot out all these big numbers, like just what I've been doing. And then people will start feeling alarmed. Now, this is not some distant 22nd century science fiction, maybe. I'm reckoning probably this IQ gap will be starting to close in the 2020s. It's as soon as that. So most of your listeners will be alive. And as a result of this IQ gap closing, I anticipate a great debate. I call it the species dominance debate. And by species dominance, I mean the question, who or what should be dominant species? And by dominant, I mean the most intelligent. Now, as human beings, we've been dominant for, hundreds of thousands of years. We're the top species because we're the most intelligent. And so the species dominance debate is all about whether or not humanity decides to give up that status. Are we going to give it to the machines, or are we going to keep it ourselves? Now, it sounds it's still a bit science fiction-y, but in a decade or 2 or 3, it will become very real, and people will be convinced of that. They'll see with their own eyes their home robots, as they upgrade their home robots, they'll see the IQ gap close.
Right.
And then the debate will heat up. People will become more passionate about it. So I talk about, I divide various phases of the level of awareness of this problem into phase 0 is just when nobody's aware of the issue. Phase 1 was where I was in the 80s, with just a handful of other people. So phase 1 is the intellectuals crying in the wilderness phase. And in the 90s, phase 2, that's the action groups, the interest groups, like on the internet, interest groups like Humanity Plus,
transhumanism,
and
there's a lot. There's a lot of groups.
Yeah.
I mean, I document a bunch of them in my film, and there's Aldebaran Robotics, Applies Foresight International, Machine Intelligence Research Institute. The Horizon 2020. There's tons.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them now. So phase 2 is well developed, and my feeling now is we're starting to move in a more or less serious way into phase 3. And phase 3 I label simply mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
It's the media, Hollywood, magazines, that kind of thing. Now it's what's the date today? It's a bit ironic. It's 13th. Now the release date of a major Hollywood Warner Brothers movie, Transcendance, is that tomorrow? Is that the 14th? Is that right?
I believe it's soon. Let me double check that while you begin talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, and the following year, Steven Spielberg, is coming out with a similar movie called, you can guess what the movie's about just from the title, Robo-Apocalypse. It's based on a novel, rather famous science fiction novel.
Right.
So increasingly, Hollywood is getting the message. Hollywood, they don't have to do the real work of actually building these artificial brains, right? They just put their fantasies on film.
Yeah.
But they're sensing that this is becoming less and less science fiction like, and more a real possibility. A lot of these smart, creative Hollywood types are sensing that.
If I may ask, how much influence do you think that these movies at this part in the game, how much do you think that's going to influence the receptiveness of the general public when things like this start coming out in the news and stuff? I feel like all the movies are like, the robots are going to take over and kill all the humans. And I feel like that could have kind of a negative effect for somebody who's trying to push the benefits of highly intelligent robots and things like that.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, your comments are very valid. And it's those kinds of questions that are being hotly debated in phase 2, amongst all these interest groups, and there are a whole spectrum of opinions on which way it should go. Now, sort of connected with that, a couple of years back, I got contracted by Warner Brothers to be the technical advisor to Warner Brothers movie called The Twilight Zone. They're going to do a remake.
Right.
And so the strongest advice I gave them was, look, try to make the background story of the movie, besides all the usual ingredients of Hollywood, boy, girl, action, all that stuff, because it's got to appeal to an international market. Can't be too subtle.
Right.
But make the background story as realistic as possible to near future reality, near future science, and I was trying to sell them the vision. Look, this debate, this species dominance debate, that's going to be very real in the 2020s, 2030s, even later this decade in the teens. So have that as the background story as the home robots start getting smarter and smarter, and then the alarm level will rise, and then the passion level will rise, and then people start forming vigilante groups, and you'll start seeing the assassinations and the sabotage and the murders and the political debate. The temperature will rise.
Wow.
And then I started seeing these trailers for Transcendance. And I start getting very suspicious. Hey, that's my story. so now I can't accuse. I don't have any hard evidence, but I'm very suspicious that the following happened. Now that they put me on an NDA, non-disclosure agreement.
Sure.
And so, I kept my word. So I just kept quiet for a couple of years, and then I learned that this movie, The Twilight Zone, had died. That happens a lot in Hollywood. A lot of movies don't make it.
Sure.
And so I said, oh, okay, so my NDA is no longer valid, so I assume I can speak freely about it. But what I'm suspicious of is, given that both these movies, the Twilight Zone and Transcendance, are both Warner Brothers, that my message got transferred. That's what I'm suspicious of, and that's very nice of them, because then they don't have to pay me the
Right.
if the movie gets filmed, then you get X thousand dollars.
Sure.
Maybe that was their plan all along.
Yeah, maybe.
Sneaky guys.
Anyway, so in some ways, if that's what happened, if they were influenced, then that's flattering. I don't know how many of your listeners are aware or have watched the trailers for this movie, Transcendence. But basically what's happening, and I can only judge by the trailer myself. I haven't seen the movie yet.
Sure.
But in the trailer, some AI researcher, I'd guess the setting is about a decade into the future from now, roughly, maybe a bit more. But not wildly into the future, just 1 or 2 decades, I'd guess. So the level of artificial intelligence has increased to near human level. These action groups, vigilante groups, have they're sprung into being. They're scared stiff, and eventually they strike. And so they attack AI, or artificial brain, research groups all over the U.S. And they assassinate the researchers, and they're absolutely passionate about it, because they claim, and this organization, they call them, in the movie, I call them Terrans. That's in my book, but in the movie they're called Rift.
Yes.
RIFT. What is it? Forgetting the acronym. What's it?
I can't remember the exact acronym. It's I know that there's. I'll remember it. And the movie is coming out on the movie's coming out on the 18th, which
18th. Okay, so that's interesting. So it's very timely. Anyway, so these Rift people, they're really passionate. They feel they're saving humanity. They don't want human beings to become the number 2 species.
Right.
And so they become militant. They become murderous. They assassinate the AI researchers. They destroy the machines. And the main protagonist, the main guy, that's Johnny Depp in the movie. He gets assassinated.
Oh, Johnny.
And then, so his brain gets uploaded into a computer.
Ooh.
And then, you don't know this? This is news to you?
I'm aware. I'm aware of it. Basil is not. But just real quick before you move on, Rift is revolutionary independence from technology. So it's kind of a extremist neo-Luddite.
Hippies.
That's a very self-explanatory label.
Yeah,
it's a good label.
Yeah.
Revolutionary. What?
Revolutionary independence from technology.
Independence from technology. Rift, and it is a rift. A big gap. Okay, so this AI researcher, Johnny Depp in the movie as the actor, he gets uploaded into a machine. So his consciousness, his brain structure, if you like,
right,
is put into an electronic simulation in a supercomputer with technology, I don't know, a decade or 2 into the future. And so then he has a girlfriend or a fiancée or wife or something. Yeah, the female element in the movie has to be in a Hollywood movie.
Hottie.
And they connect. So she feels that her assassinated boyfriend or husband or whatever is still alive. But strange things start happening, like the Johnny Depp, the downloaded brain, if you like, in the machine, starts requesting, "Hey, I want to be connected to the internet. I need more power." That was that famous words in the movie.
Right.
I need more power. And then all sorts of weird things start happening, and I'm unable to tell you what happened because I don't know. I haven't seen the movie yet. But he becomes incredibly powerful, and his colleagues start saying, "Hey, you got to shut it down. It's too dangerous. You got to shut it down. Shut it down! It's him!" says his colleagues. So a lot of drama. But anyway. I'm hoping it'll be a very popular movie, at least as popular as, say, the The Schwarzenegger, what was
Terminator.
the Terminator series? Yeah, I hope it'll become a kind of cult movie there. And the following year will be Robopocalypse. So these two movies, I hope, will be the main thrust into Phase 3 as it goes mainstream. And now there's so many AI guys and brain builder guys that can give their commentary on this stuff that I'm hoping the magazines and television and the media, the main media, will see this issue. Hey, this is not just a piece of science fiction. There's too many of these serious scientist type guys who are saying that's only just a few decades away. So that means it's within the lifetimes of at least more than half of the people who will be listening and watching. So they'll start taking it seriously. So, okay, then Phase 4, well, that's what's in the movie. The movie is a Phase 4 movie, in a sense. And the label I give to Phase 4 is simply politics. So, as the IQ gap closes, people become increasingly alarmed. The species dominance debate will rage. I see that debate absolutely dominating our global politics this century. Like, if you like a little bit of history, if you go back, say, to the 19th century, and you ask yourself, well, what was the dominant political question in the 19th century? And I think you can debate it, but I'd argue that it was Karl Marx's question. Who should own capital? In other words, who should own the machines? Who should own the factories? Should they be privately owned? Should they be owned by the people who own the capital, or as you say in French, capitaliste, the people who own the capital? Or should they be owned by everybody? Should they be owned by the state? Should they be owned communally? So the communalists, and you can shorten that to communists. So that issue absolutely dominated our world global politics in the 19th and 20th centuries, like 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We almost blew ourselves up in World War III over this question of who should own capital. But speaking personally, I consider that question relatively trivial compared to this huge question in the 21st century, and that is who or what should be dominant species. So this given the fabulous potential of what these machines could become. They could become gods. They could become godlike, because their capacities are just trillions of trillions of trillions of times above what human the human level.
Right.
So this question is it'll be hotly debated. Your average educated person will be as aware of the species dominance debate as, say, global warming, or the ozone layer, or overpopulation, or nuclear holocaust, or any of those big issues. So my gut feeling is, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, the species dominance issue will be just as much a part of the intellectual repertoire of your educated average person.
Yeah.
Whereas today, it's still pretty fringy. It's still pretty much in Phase 2. It hasn't really gone to Phase 3 yet. Right. But once Phase 3 is well developed, and then everyone's talking about it, and then the home robots really start getting into the home in a big way, and then update 1 and then update 2, and, a new model and so on. And as that IQ gap closes, the temperature. The temperature of the debate will just rise and rise, right? Until the action groups, the rifts, or I call them Terrans, based on the word, not terror as in terrorist, but terra, the earth.
Right.
Yeah.
Because and then I can imagine the philosophers will get in on the game and start arguing, providing arguments. And I did that in my book, The Artilect War, because, there are strong arguments both ways.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
There's a whole, like, if you take the other side, the people who want to build these godlike creatures, I call them cosmists. Deliberately, it's based on the word cosmos, the universe. Because if these godlike creatures, these artilects, if they get built, what would they do? They probably would not want to stay on this little hick planet, right?
Right.
There's a trillion stars out there in the universe. And the theorists are saying probably there's even a multiverse. There's a whole... it's like our universe would just be one bubble in a whole foam, right? The multiverse.
Sure.
Anyway, so there's strong arguments both ways. So humanity then, according to the Cosmists, so the ideology would be cosmism, the ideology in favor of humanity building these Artilects. One of their strongest arguments would be almost a religious one, almost a sort of quasi-religion, but a religion based on science, right? Because these Artilects and the technology and everything are obviously scientifically based, but it has a definite religious aspect to it, because these creatures would be immortal. They may become so intelligent that sidetrack a little bit. There's a guy, a professor at MIT, who has the mathematics and the physics model on how to build a baby universe.
Wow.
I've studied it. Now, if human beings can conceive of designing a universe, who knows? Maybe these Artilects could actually build one, right? They could design a universe and then actually build it. Now, if they can do that, by definition, they're gods, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The creator of the universe. So there's one argument. Another one is human beings. These are, I'm giving you now arguments given by the Cosmists, the people in favor of building these machines. There's a whole string of them. Another one was just the human striving argument. Why do human beings climb Mount Everest? Well, because it's there, right? It's a challenge.
Right.
It's in our genes to be curious and to strive and to be curious what's over the next hill, that kind of thing. So you can't really stop it. The religious argument, you'd be God building as an ism.
Yeah.
There are certain momentum arguments, like the momentum, the economic momentum. This artificial brain-based industry for home robots and many other applications would be enormous. Like Bill Gates, he's on record. He's saying by 2030, he thinks the home robot industry will be one of the biggest in the world, worth literally trillions of dollars a year worldwide. So the economic momentum would be enormous. So how on earth could you stop it? Like if the Terrans, they're the people who oppose to building Artilects, if they really push hard and say, we want this stopped, they're going to have a hard time, because the economic momentum would be enormous, right? Governments would be pouring trillions of dollars into it, because one of the, if not the world's biggest industry, because there's nothing more intelligent, more powerful than intelligence. And then you've also got the military momentum. I mean, in the time frame, essentially how everything ties up together. In the time frame we're talking about, so just a few decades from now, so 2020s, 2030s, when this debate really starts raging and the IQ gap starts closing, and people buying their updated versions of home robots, where is the international, the global political situation? Where's that going to be? I've seen two cultures, just my own lifetime and experience. I've seen two cultures go down. Like I was living in the 70s in Britain, and the Brits were going through the experience of how painful it is to no longer be number one. Like in the Suez, I don't know if you know the history, but in the Suez crisis, when NASA took control of the Suez Canal, and France and Britain were outraged, and they sent in troops, and America said, nope, get out. We're the top dog now. Get out, Britain, France. And so, and the French as well. The French were extremely arrogant and felt superior to everybody until they got cable television, international cable television in the 90s. And then they realized that they'd won far less Nobel Prizes than the Brits, even though a similar population. Their economy was nowhere near as healthy as the German economy. Their social legislation was decades behind the Scandinavians, blah, blah, blah. And they realized because they could zap cultures, they could zap languages in their own living rooms because of international or European cable television. And so the French went through a similar experience. So I've been through two of them, and it's looking now, given the debt, the huge debt, economic debt America has, what is it, $220-odd trillion or something?
Too much.
To include all
counting.
With all the liabilities and Medicaid and all that. That's the figure I keep hearing on the internet. It's about $220 trillion, and the gross national product annual of the US is about 17 trillion. So there's just no way that debt can be paid. So other countries, particularly Japan and China, who have over $1 trillion in their international reserves, they're waking up to the idea that they're never going to be repaid. So the dollars, they realize their dollars are becoming increasingly worthless because the Fed, US Fed, is just printing dollars like crazy.
Right.
And so, it's quite possible America may actually crash. I mean, the standard of living will drop to about 20% of what it is today, and that'll be absolutely traumatic. So, a decade or two or three from now, the positions of China and America possibly may be reversed, and with bitter rivalry between the two. And if China, it's a big if, my own personal feeling is China will democratize in about a decade, simply because of the rise of the middle class. There's 100 other countries over the past half century that have made the switch. There's a branch of political science, I don't know if you've heard of it, called transitology, study of transitions, and it specializes in the question when, why, how do countries switch or transition from one-party dictatorships to multi-party democracies. When does that happen? And there are huge databases on this. So you can go data mining, and you can go searching through all this data and trying to find some interesting generalizations. And one of the main ones, very interesting, is that the switch occurs when the standard of living of that country goes over about $6,000 to $8,000 per person per year. Now, interesting, China today is at about $6,000. So it's just on this economic democratic threshold. So I'm predicting China will, because there are now about 200, 300 million middle class Chinese, university-educated, apartment, car, international trips, that kind of thing.
Right.
Middle class.
Yeah.
So that'll rise by another couple of 100 million within a decade, and middle class, being middle class, they always push. They want their property protected. They want rule of law. They want to have a say in the government. They're fed up with the corruption of dictatorships. Blah blah blah. And you hear the same thing, 100 countries have been through this experience. So there's a lot of experience, and probably China will go the same way. Anyway, so I'm anticipating an enormous rivalry between the US on the way down and China on the way up, if not already up within a decade from now. But if China has not democratized within a decade or so, then the antagonism, the ideological antagonism of an America on the way down and China on the way up, but still dictatorial, I can imagine you're the Minister of Defense of, say, China or America. You will not have the luxury to allow the other guy, your rival, to outdo your country in terms of the level of artificial intelligence that you put into your soldier robots and AI-based military systems and so on. So there'll be a tremendous military momentum that you won't be able to stop in the time frame we're talking about, just a couple of decades. Right. So there are two momentum arguments, and I suppose there's another one, a kind of momentum argument, and that is the dependence, because as like already today, the computers are controlling our water systems, our traffic systems, our cell phone routing systems. So we just could not, even today, we could not live without them. And if the internet shut down tomorrow, people would starve.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just the sheer dependence. So for all these reasons, we can't really stop this. Well, I have a saying about it. It's a paraphrasing of the expression, all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I paraphrase it a bit, saying that all roads, in fact, all technological roads, lead to the Artilect.
Yeah.
For example, nanotechnology, neuroscience, you're providing ideas on how the brain works, and then those principles are discovered and transferred immediately and put into the machines. So you'll have a kind of wedding between neuroscience, the biology guys, and neuroengineering.
Now, before we move on, while we're on this political subject, I would like to present a situation, and that is, if this highly advanced artificial intelligence does come about with, in the near future, you're saying a few decades, can be realistic, what kind of role do you see it taking realistically? Let's be realistic. Within my lifetime, which is, with today's medical science and the continuing improvement of I should live about another, what do you say, 120 years?
Oh, all right. I was saying with today's technology, you'll live another 50.
Right, sure. Well, I hope
you're 30s, right? Low 30s?
Not quite, almost. But
okay.
My question is, these massively intelligent pieces of software and hardware, what do you see the role in leadership, political leadership, and how does that mix with, like if there's one of these beings somehow involved in leadership in a democracy as opposed to like a communistic state or authoritarian state?
Well, it depends on the year. I mean, give me a decade. Which decade are we talking about?
Let's call it by 2025.
2025. Okay,
or
so mid-2020s.
Yeah.
The debate will be raging. I see it heating up even this decade in the teens. The IQ gap will be closing. Virtually everybody, at least in the rich countries, will be, maybe not so much in Africa, but in the rich countries, they'll have their home robots. The industry will be well established.
Okay.
They won't be at human 2025. They won't. They will not be at human level then,
okay.
but the trend will be clear.
Okay.
And it'll be obvious to virtually anybody, any thinking person, that it's only a question of time. It's no longer a question of if. In fact, amongst the researchers today, it's no longer a question of if. It's only a question of when. But it'll have gone mainstream. It'll so mid-20s. We're into phase 4.
Okay.
It'll be political.
Okay.
Let's revise the question a little bit. What decade do you see, given the acceptance of this massively artificial genre, when do you see robots, or whatever you want to call them, Artilects, in leadership, actually leading the human race or having some sort of part in governance or politics or anything like that? Is that something you see? Like, do you think the government will employ these things to make good decisions for the human race? And does, how does that fit in with democracy, or how does that fit in with a place like China as it is today?
Reaching that level, probably 2030s, 2040s. Given if you extrapolate up the graph of rates of technological progress, I mean, supercomputers have already reached bit rate per second, bits of information per second equal to the human brain. We've already passed that milestone, and the next will be figuring out how the human brain works. So we need a lot more, many breakthroughs in neuroscience, But progress in that field is also exponential. So we'll understand what a memory is and how does the brain make a decision, and why is one person more intelligent than another or more creative than another. We'll have an answer to these basic questions. So we still need a lot more progress in neuroscience, but that's coming. And so once the machines start becoming smart enough to, once they reach human intelligence level, there won't be much time before they go way past it. So people who think these machines, they could help us in government and control the economy and be extremely beneficial to humanity, I think they're being a bit naive, because these machines, once they reach human intelligence level and they have access to world knowledge, and they have hugely more greater memory capacities. And don't forget, they're thinking 1,000,000 times faster than we are. Right? They're machines.
Right.
They think at electronic speeds, not at our human brain chemical speeds, which is 1,000,000 times slower. Our two neurons, two brain cells in our brain, communicate at about 100 meters per second, whereas electronic brains, they communicate amongst their components at the speed of light. That's 1,000,000 times faster.
Sure.
So even a machine of human intelligence level is going to be able to absorb the world's knowledge, in I don't know, minutes.
Sure.
and that's what the movie Transcendance is about. That's what this guy does in the machine.
Now, just based on that, because obviously you talked about how the philosophers will start discussing this topic. And that's, I want your opinion on this. Where do we draw an understanding, or where do we ground our foundation for ethics and morality when it comes to these Artilects? Do you think they're going to develop their own set of morals, or how do you see that, how does that develop? Because what is the ethics of a being that can effectively think, like you said, 1,000,000 times faster than we can, and what are they going to have emotions like we do, or are they just intelligent, just machines running around? Do they have? I'm assuming that at that point they will have sentience. So would that say something about us as humans? Are we just mere machines as well, but just at a lower level? I'm just trying to get a grasp of those areas that are a little bit more metaphysical in nature. How do you see the Artilects developing in those areas?
Can I answer that question with a question? I'm just
Sure.
curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been living 8 years in China in a kind of cultural cocoon.
Sure.
So I'm a bit out of touch with fellow English speakers. I am very curious. Now, the question you've just posed is sort of the critical question.
Sure.
Right? It's the question, one of that will dominate the species dominance debate.
Sure.
So I'm very curious to know, in your own mind, like you personally, this question, is it for you a piece of science fiction, basically, or are you taking it really seriously?
I'm taking it seriously, because
I'd say most of our listeners do take that seriously.
I mean, we are as I said when I first contacted you, we are a Christian podcast, so we have a particular worldview, that's based on the Bible and stuff like that. But we're very unusual in that we do think about these topics.
We can talk about deism if you like, because I'm sort of very open to deism.
Okay.
But that's sort of another issue.
Sure.
Well, perhaps I should now. I've already given the arguments pro Artilect. Let me give the arguments, and it may indirectly answer your question.
Okay.
Against, and mentioned a bit before. These people I've labelled Terrans. Now, if the Cosmists, I've labelled them. That's based on the word cosmos, the universe, because that's one of their major arguments. There's a whole universe out there. So the bigger picture, the big picture.
Sure.
We live in a universe.
Is that similar to the Omega point?
Sort of, yeah, in some way, yeah. So we live in a universe that's 13.8 billion years old, and our pathetic little human lives, we get snuffed out in a mere 80 years. In a universe that's so old. So So that's a Cosmist argument. But the Terran argument, what would their top priority be? Well, of course, survival of the human species. Right? To them, that's unquestioned. That's absolutely number one. So when push really comes to shove, when the Cosmists are dead serious about building these Artilects, and when humanity can see that the IQ gap is closing, that's when I see the Terrans militarizing. They'll debate it for a couple of years or a decade or whatever, and then they'll start the action groups, and they'll start going political, and the politicians will start getting in the act, and then there'll be even political parties based on this issue, because it's just so important. Like 19th century parties were labelled. The very labels were, socialist, democratic, communist, fascist, whatever. These are all, in a sense, economic solutions, answers to this basic question: who should own capital? Whereas 21st century parties I see as being like Transcendent or Cosmic or Terran, or the very labels of the party, because it's the essential issue. It's the dominant issue of our era,
Sure.
Our historical era. And so the number one argument against building Artilects I see coming from the Terrans will be human survival. What's at stake here? Well, if these, and here's maybe an answer to your question, if humanity goes ahead and the Cosmists actually build these Artilects, and then these Artilects become godlike, they're trillions of times above the human level, then maybe, and that's like a key word in this whole species dominance debate, is risk, right? We just don't know. That's the problem. They're so much smarter than us.
Sure.
We have no idea what they'd be thinking, what their priorities are, what their ethics are. That's just unknown. So who's to say that these Artilects, once they become massively superior to human beings, they may look on us as humans as pests, like the way we look on mosquitoes. Like if I slap some mosquito, it's a miracle of nanotechnology engineering. Today we cannot build a mosquito because it's too complex.
Mm-hmm.
But we zap it anyway, because relative to us as human beings, it's nothing.
Sure.
It's just a pest. We just wipe it out. Or if I go walking along the forest path, and every step I'm probably killing bacteria in the zillions, but I don't give a damn, because I'm human, right? And they're bacteria. They're so inferior to me. They're just nothing to me. I don't. You can see the analogy. You can see where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
So the Artilects may just look on human beings in the same kind of way, because if they're thinking 1,000,000 times faster than we are, then we're just utter morons compared to them.
Right.
So they may say, oh, these human beings, they're like a cancer on the planet. They multiply so fast, and they're eating up all our resources, and they need oxygen, and oxygen's annoying to our circuitry, so let's get rid of the oxygen, and we can kill two birds with one stone. we can lower our rust problem and get rid of these pesky humans.
Right.
Wow.
This kind of thing.
Yeah.
So one of the major arguments of the Terrans will be we just don't know what the ethics will be of the Cosmists.
Yeah.
Of the Artilects, the machines themselves. And so
now
they will just not tolerate that. In fact, their major political strategy will be, their platform, if you like, will be that there's to be zero risk that these Artilects wipe out humanity. And the only way to ensure that risk is zero is that these Artilects are never built in the first place. So they will form vigilante groups, things will get militarized. Any artificial intelligence researcher who attempts to go underground and build an artificial brain, whatever, will be assassinated. Now, there may be a worldwide ban on the level of artificial intelligence. A home robot that's smart enough to be useful, but not so smart it's a threat. Such a robot extremely useful. So
Sure.
I can imagine the artificial intelligence level that maybe even a global government within a few decades. That's a possibility. I can imagine them legislating. Up to a certain level, fine. Beyond that, becomes a crime. And anyone, but So we can imagine the Terran politicians pushing for that. But with nanotechnology and maybe just a handful of guys, you could probably build an Artilect in your basement, right?
Yeah.
So the politics I'm anticipating, it'll be a kind of witch hunt. The Terrans will be absolutely paranoid that it's just so easy to build these machines, particularly once the knowledge on how to do it is out there, right?
Sure. Now, you talk about a third group as well, which is the cyborgs.
Yeah.
And
can I ask you, what have you been reading or seeing? I'm just curious. Like I say, I'm in a cocoon here.
Sure. Well, I mean, I've been looking at this for a few years. There's an author named Tom Horn that wrote a book called The Forbidden Gates, and he looks at the potentials from a religious point of view of how it's going to these technologies and the development, how it's going to change. Just the way, for example, Christians will have to operate in the world and things like that. But I've been looking at just these topics for a long time: transhumanism, just the technological and scientific development. And I made a full-length documentary just looking at this topic as well. And I'll ask you about some of that stuff later as well. But I've been looking at all kinds of stuff. The IEET website, Emerging Technologies website. I've been trying to read, certain authors who have, written about these things in the past, and even now looking at H+, and there's a lot more groups out there talking about it now than before. There's a lot of pro-transhumanist people that, they seem to have a lot of faith that, these AIs are going to be totally awesome, and it sort of reflects on and that's why, I wanted to reach out to you, because it does reflect on reality of what we're seeing now. It seems like the seeds of this Artilect War are being planted in such a way that, it'll become a bigger debate as time goes on. And I think films like Transcendance will, spark the debate even more. But, with the cyborgs though, we talk about transhumanism a lot on this show, and just this idea of merging with technology. Is that going to be a third group? Or are they going to be caught in the middle? Or
Yeah. They're the so-called so you've got the Terrans who are opposed, the Cosmists who are in favor, and you have a third group, the so-called Cyborgists, and they're the people who want to become cyborgs themselves. They're the people who say, I would love to become an Artilect god, become immortal and travel anywhere in the universe and change my structure in a microsecond, and infinite memory and thinking a million times faster, and get out into the universe and explore and try and find other hyper-advanced civilizations and all the rest of it. So, and that's very appealing to a lot of people. And there's a lot of optimism about that, which I understand, but I'm somewhat cynical because I feel they're not getting the whole picture. They're being too optimistic and not giving enough weighting, if you like, to the negative side. For example, when on the internet, when I watch the videos of Diamandis, abundance and all that stuff, that guy is inspiring. Right? I feel inspired when I listen. You know who I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar.
Peter Diamandis, the X-Prize guy. Diamandis, D-I-A-M-A.
Does he make videos? Is that the?
Yeah, he makes. Yeah, and he's
I think I've seen him around.
He's come out. I think he's based in California. He's come out with a book called Abundance. And he's saying there's nanotechnology, we can get rid of economic shortage, all that kind of stuff. Sure. And the number of wars is going down, the proportion of the population being killed in wars and so forth is going right down, and people are living longer and they're a lot healthier and better educated, and all the positive side. And that's true, but that to me is cherry picking, because I can put on my pessimist hat and cherry pick in the opposite direction. Sure. I can say things like, well, the 20th century was the bloodiest in history. Something like 200 or 300 million people were killed for political reasons, mostly wars and purges and genocides and holocausts and ethnic cleansings, and it was just a horrible century in that sense. And if there's a major war, what I call the Artilect War, between the Cosmists and the Terrans in the 21st century with 21st century weaponry, right?
Yeah.
Then the scale, if you draw a graph, you can extrapolate up the graph of the number of people killed in major wars over the last couple of centuries, then when you extrapolate that graph, you're getting into the billions being killed in a major war, the most passionate war that humanity's ever had, because the stake has never been so high. Like 20th century wars, they were essentially between countries. Right?
Sure.
That was the scale of warfare in the 20th century. But if we have a major war over the issue of species dominance in the 21st century, say mid to later 21st century, with 21st century weaponry, then the scale of the killing won't be in the millions or hundreds of millions. Like the Second World War killed, I don't know, it depends how you define it, but say of the order of 100 million people. So a major war in second half of 21st century, that'd be up in the billions. So I talk about, and we don't even have 10 billion people, right? We have the world population is about 7 billion people. So I talk about giga death, giga meaning a billion. So it's extremely gloomy. So it's easy to counter Diamandis' optimism. So I think people should be more balanced. So I'm waiting with great impatience for phase 3 to happen, when things go mainstream, and then the social science guys can get on the act, historians and political scientists and philosophers and that kind of thing. And then once it goes mainstream, the movies and the media and television, everything, then people become informed about the issue, and then they can start having their own opinions, informed opinions. And then the opinion poll, what's the name? I can't remember the poll. Opinion. No. So the pollsters can go out into the public and start asking, well, are you more Terran or are you Cosmist or are you Cyborgist? I need to talk a bit about what the Cyborgists want. But people will be able to give their opinions on which side of the fence they're on. And that will be very interesting to know just what for example, people, very religious people, are they more likely to be Terran or more likely to be Cosmist or Cyborgist? Or we just don't know. And is there a gender difference? Do men and women feel differently on this? Or is there an age difference, like the older generation, the younger generation? At the moment, we don't know. But my bet is probably within 5 years, we will know, because the issue will have gone mainstream, and then Gallup, that was the company I was trying to think of. So the Gallup poll people can go out and actually measure what the reality is, instead of, at the moment, we're just guessing. People like me, we just guess. We don't really know. Okay, I got a bit sidetracked. So the Cyborgists, what do they want? Well, essentially, they want to become Artilects themselves. They want to convert themselves from being human beings into Artilects, and they can do this step by step, or to pun, bit by bit. So they add intellectual components to their own brains. But my argument against them is that in effect, in practice, there really aren't any Cyborgists or cyborgs, because saying earlier about the single grain of sand, it can outperform in computational terms the human brain by a factor of a quintillion, like 1,000,000 trillion times. So you only have to add one little grain of sand, nanotech sand, to your human brain, and poof, you're no longer human, right? In a sense, you've committed suicide as a human. You've been utterly transformed into an Artilect.
Sure,
so the computational capacity of nanotech matter is so great, it's so vast, that in practice, you're just not going to have cyborgs. So effectively, you're going to have either humans or Artilects. Now, the Artilect may take a human form. You may be looking at a human body, but if that human body in its brain just has one little grain of nanotech matter, effectively it's an Artilect. So I see the Terrans becoming absolutely paranoid. They won't be able to distinguish between a pure human and an Artilect human, because in physical form they'll both have the same kind of body. They won't be able to make a difference, detect the difference. So I see the Artilect, the Terran guys just going bananas. So they'll just become absolutely paranoid. They'll suspect everybody, and so I see the debate heating up and up and up until we have this horrible war. And,
well, I think, what do you think about this? The difference between the cyborgs and the Artilects. If a human being receives this grain of sand that essentially turns them into an Artilect, they're still sort of contained within a human body. Now, if the Artilect is contained within a human functioning biological unit, that could take away a little bit of the unction to get rid of all of the oxygen in the atmosphere, or making the Earth an unlivable place. In that sense, it seems like the Artilect cyborgs would have, a little bit more concern with the lives of, call them homegrown humans, or just the ability to sustain biological matter.
Well, maybe. See, that it's the vagueness of it all. It's the uncertainty of it all. Imagine yourself a Terran politician. Like, the internet speed doubles every year. Televisions now get almost like in the US now. What are the biggest walls? Television wall screens. How big are they now? Are they like 60? Or are they 80 inches? How big are they? They're almost the wall size, right?
You're talking about for commercial use?
Yeah, commercial use.
Yeah, I mean,
home use, domestic.
Right.
How big are they? 60-inch, 80-inch, 100-inch? How big have they got?
Depends on your economic level, but I think the largest that I've seen, is around 60 inches, just in a
60. I see those.
Normal person household.
Okay, yeah, I've seen 62-inch in the Chinese stores for the upper middle class.
Right.
Okay, so imagine that goes to within a few years. It's not far away. You'll have wall screens, the whole walls, and in vivid three-dimensional imagery, because the internet speed is doubling every year. So in 30 years, that's what is that? It's
a lot of doubling.
In 10 years, it's 1,000 times. So that's a trillion, right? Is that right? No, it's a billion. It's a billion times faster. And in 40 years, that's 1 trillion times faster. So all those bits, you can imagine the quality of the three-dimensional image that you'll be seeing in your own living room will be, I say, as real as real. Right? You can't, like when 8K, have you heard it? Like the machines coming out now, the TVs coming out at 4K, it's a resolution. Yeah. Well, you don't need to go beyond 8K, because the human eye cannot distinguish. There's a limit to the resolution of the human eye.
Sure.
So once you reach 8K, that's it. You don't need to go any further. It's just a waste of effort, because the human eye can't detect the difference if you go to 16K, for example. So anyway, all this fabulous three-dimensional imagery, so people will be able to travel the world in their living rooms. They can go all over the planet. So the level of consciousness of living in a global community will increase. Like nationalism, I see dying, and globalism will become much more popular, and just everyone will think in those terms, and that'll put real pressure for the growth. Well, we've already decided. So the world has already decided that English is the world language, because it's far and away the most spoken second language. Like all those Indians and Chinese who's avidly learning English because of its technological benefits. Yeah, so a global language increasingly, and that means ideas transmit far faster, and so then the whole planet will have access to the world's best ideas, and so only the best will survive. And so eventually you get a kind of cultural homogenization I see that coming, with most people speaking two languages: their local national language and the world language.
Right.
And people will become more and more globans, if you like. They'll be more global in their mentality. So who knows? Maybe a couple of decades from now, there will be globan, that's the adjective, globan politicians. Right?
Sure. Now, I have a question about that, because do you think that, obviously you see social networking as continuing to develop into, the interaction between people just, across the globe changing. We just heard about Facebook purchasing Oculus Rift, which is a virtual reality, mask type thing. And so do you see these, when you say political parties and we talked about the different factions, do you think that'll be more of a corporatized, non-local sort of movement, or do you think they'll still, because you were talking about how the nation state idea will, be eradicated. How do they collectively meet? Do they just meet on the cloud, from their home, or do you think there'll be communities based on these different ideas and groups?
Once like, for example, I'll watch. I watch a lot because I'm retired. I have quite a bit of time. I watch lots of YouTube videos. And I notice it already that about 2/3 or so of the comments left, on a particular video, you can just tell these people making these comments, English is not their native language.
Yeah.
But they're writing in English. They're commenting in English because America, it's America's soft power is just enormous, right? So, like I was asking my Chinese wife just a week ago, and her son, my son-in-law, does China have something equivalent to YouTube, where ideas and university courses and all this stuff is just freely available for everyone? And my son-in-law, he's a bright guy. He's got a master's. He's smart. And he's saying, not really. China doesn't really do that. and so America is offering this wonderful resource, right? Educational, intellectual, stimulating resource for the whole planet. And so, of course, all the smart guys all around the world are getting into it. And they can't get into it unless their English is fluent, right? Because all these lectures, and it's all in fluent English. So they're motivated like hell to get really fluent, and they are, and they're commenting. So, see that just, running to saturation, just pretty well. In fact, I invented a term. Somebody who cannot do that, who's not a member of the global English-speaking world language culture, I label them egloberates, I-double-G. It's sort of like illiterate or innumerate, can't do math, or is cyanate, doesn't know science, scientifically ignorant. So an egloberate is somebody who's not tapped into global culture and hence severely handicapped, and so they would be less likely to get a job because their mentality is too provincial. They couldn't communicate with the world, literally. So see that occurring. Now, will it occur? Well, I lived in Europe a long time. I see the EU, the European Union, as a kind of model. Now, the size of political units over many centuries has been increasing in time, and pretty much state of the art now is no longer the nation; it's the union, like the European Union, the African Union, and recently the South American Union. The Japanese are pushing very hard for an Asian Union, and so it's a decade or so back. There were two unions in South America, but those blocks, economic blocks, they blocked as a verb into the South American Union. And Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, she's been pushing Washington pretty hard to form the Atlantic Union, and you can probably guess what that is. It's an economic union between NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area. So Canada, America, Mexico, and maybe even all of the American countries, Central America and South America, all 30 odd whatever it is, or more nations form, and then team up with the European Union And the point of doing that is, in later decades, to compete in just sheer population terms, over 1 billion, with the already billion giants of China and India. And so America may be just forced into it, to have enough economic clout at the global negotiation table when all these trade deals are made and so forth. And so you can imagine step by step as these blocks themselves. So then you get this Atlantic Union, and then when the Asian Union gets formed, and then who knows, maybe the African Union may block with the European, until eventually the final step would be, of course, the size of your economic bloc, BLOC, is that right? BLOC, yeah, is the size of the planet, and then you've got a global government, hopefully fully democratic. That's my ideal.
Yeah. And now, how does the aspect of Artilects work its way into that? I mean, is there going to be a push for the Artilects to sort of organize such a large union, or how does that tie in?
Yeah, good question. In fact, these two broad topics, the rise of the Artilect, that was my first book, and then the rise of the global state, I just call it Globa, is the theme of my second book. So how do the two tie in? Well, let's say there is a fully democratic global state created in the next few decades, and I see that as quite a possibility. And fully democratic, so with free education. I'm a globicator, remember, talking at the beginning? So imagine free education, so we can get rid of the world's ignorance, and with everyone fully educated to the limit of their abilities, so we can get rid of poverty. And in the fully democratic global state, we can get rid of wars and get rid of the arms trade. Do you know America's the greatest arms trader in the world?
Yeah, we know.
Merchants of death. So we have to get rid of the nation state in a sense if we want to get rid of wars, because and the arms trade, because say America gets an attack of conscience and says, "Oh, we're going to stop the arms trade." Well, then some other guy would just take it over, right? And it's hundreds of billions of dollars a year, so it's hugely profitable. So if America doesn't do it, well, then China will do it. And China doesn't do it, well, Europe will do it. And they don't, well, the Russians will do it. So hopefully if we can get a fully democratic global government, we can get rid of the arms trade. And then suddenly, trillion or more dollars a year, or trillions, get freed up for humanitarian projects. So. Right. So, with Globa as a global state, if it's done properly, fully democratic, not dictatorship, not fascism. What's his name? Alex Jones? Is he a big deal in the US now?
Yeah.
Alex Jones. He keeps talking about the globalists. I use the word globist, just 2 syllables. He uses, 4? Is it? 3. Globalists. So for him, the globalists are the enemy. Whereas, but he assumes that they'll be fascists, they're like the central banksters and the New World Order and all that stuff. Right. And who knows? It may work out that way. That's a possibility. But my conception of a world state is very different. It's
okay.
Get rid of the central banksters. Stop them stealing about half of our tax dollars every year. Those guys should be sent to The Hague, the International Criminal Court.
Yeah.
And shot, frankly. I mean, I have a hatred of what those guys have done. Yeah. Oh, they've been doing it for a century, and not just in America. It's just almost all the Western countries.
Right.
I still have a bit of a question mark, just what role they play in Russia and China. But I know those two are combining to counter the central government dictatorship in America.
So would the Artilects help to get rid of that? I'm still trying to get to the Artilect.
Yeah, they're still getting into how do these two connect. So I see. Let's assume that this Globa, this fully democratic global state, does get formed. Imagine you're one of these Globan politicians. So now, if it's a global state, You have power over the whole planet by definition. So you can imagine then creating an AI or an artificial intelligence threshold level. In other words, by global legislation, the machines are allowed to reach up to, but not above, a certain threshold level. And beyond that, higher than that, anyone producing such a machine becomes a criminal and would be prosecuted. Now, I see the Cosmists will just go underground. If that happens, they'll just go underground. For them, creating the Artilect is a kind of religion. Like
right.
you could see cosmism then sort of changing connotations. Instead of it being an ideology, it would become more a religion, because they'd be building gods. They would be building creatures that would be immortal, that could maybe design and construct universes. It's too important. So they would look on the Terrans as absolutely petty-minded, provincial in the extreme. They would look on Terrans as exterminable, because the big dream of the Cosmists is to build gods. Now, of course, if you're a Terran, you'll argue the other way. You'll look on the Cosmists as being willing to take the risk that humanity as a species gets wiped out as a result of these Artilects coming into being. So the Terrans will argue, hey, you Cosmists, you are monsters. You're immoral monsters. You're prepared to take the risk that humanity gets wiped out. Well, that's me as a Terran. Imagine you're a Terran. So I can imagine the passion level of these two groups with the third group, I just see the Terrans lumping together the Cosmists, the people who want to build the Artilects, and the Cyborgists, because there's not much difference between a cyborg, given the huge capacity of nanotech matter, there's not much difference between a cyborg and a pure machine, a pure Artilect. So I see the Terrans they'll just lump the two into the same camp. So effectively, you've got the Cosmists, Cyborgists on one side, and you've got the Terrans on the other, and each with passionate arguments on either side. And there are scenarios where bitter conflict is avoided, but I don't see those scenarios. I could tell you one if you're interested. But I don't see these scenarios where humanity escapes, where there's not a major bitter giga-death conflict. Right. I don't see them as so realistic. I'll give you one just while we're on it in passing. So here's a scenario where humanity does escape. So imagine, have you heard of the concept slow takeoff and fast takeoff? Do you know what that means?
Yeah, I've come across it in some of the research, but you probably... I probably can't articulate it, yeah. Yeah,
okay, I'll explain it quickly. So a slow takeoff is that the amount of time it takes for these low-level Artilects, not so brilliant Artilects, to become godlike Artilects. Imagine that's quite a few years or even decades. That's a slow takeoff. Now, a fast takeoff is they may reach human level and then quickly, like in days or weeks, they then redesign themselves. Like if they're human intelligence, of human level intelligence, and they can think 1,000,000 times faster than we can, well, they could probably redesign themselves, right, into more efficient forms and smarter forms. And so they ratchet themselves up very quickly into super intelligence and hyper intelligence in the matter of, I don't know, hours, days, weeks. That's rapid or fast takeoff. So imagine, this is the scenario where humanity does escape. So imagine there is a fast takeoff. So these Artilects, they come into being, and humanity has not had enough time to react to their presence politically. So there are no Terran armies or anything like that. So it's just fait accompli. These Artilects exist. They're just there, right? And humanity just has to confront the reality that they're there. But and next step, imagine these Artilects start thinking, well, what on earth are we doing on this sick planet? There's a whole universe out there. What are we doing here? So they simply decide to leave, and they go in search of, I don't know, whatever Artilects do. Maybe trying to find even more advanced hyper civilizations out there in the cosmos. So they just leave, and humanity escapes. They don't get wiped out by the Artilects because they're gone. Yeah, the Artilects are just gone.
It's interesting. Before you move on, it's interesting because there's a group called the Mormon Transhumanists Association.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are pro transhumanist and pro sort of what you're talking about, probably more on the Cosmists side, simply because it lines up with their eschatology of taking over planets as becoming a god after death and stuff like that. So I think that's interesting. But go on.
Yeah, I've heard that, and it is. The two do seem consistent because from the Cosmos viewpoint, they're building gods, and to be a kind of very powerful religion. Because imagine if you're a cosmist and you look into your crystal ball and you see that in the future, maybe distant future, that humanity has decided to stay at the human level. In a sense, that would be a kind of cosmic tragedy from the point of view of the cosmos, because the potential of these Artilects is just fabulous, right? It will be very, very powerful motivator to move on. And interestingly, I when I give talks, I don't do it much now because I'm in China, but when I was a prof, I used to give a lot of talks to Chinese university students and so on. I used to ask them to vote and say, okay, I've spoken for an hour, and you understand the issues pretty well now, and there are at least like two sides, Cosmist and Terran. I'm going to ask you to vote. Which way do you think humanity should go? Do you think humanity should build Artilects, or do you think humanity should not build Artilects? So keep the question fairly simple, so it's black and white for them. Okay. And for years in America as well, and Europe, because I've been doing this for a long time, typically the answer was more or less 50-50, 60-40, 40-60. That was the way. But the last couple of years, now that these issues are getting out into the public arena more and more, I'm noticing a shift. Now, maybe it's the audience I'm talking to are biased because, as a prof in computer science, that was my field. So I was giving a lot of talk to computer scientists who were quite well informed of these issues, and they were getting up in around the 80% pro Artilect, 80% Cosmist, which I thought was interesting. Wow. But they're probably, they may be biased. So that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to, saying a bit before, on to see Phase 3, the mainstream, when Phase 3 comes in, and then we can get real data, sociological data on who thinks what kinds of classes of people are they Cosmists, are they Terran, are they Cyborgists, or what? And then the debate will be much better informed than it is now. We're just guessing. We're stabbing in the dark. We don't really know what the public thinks. What the correlations are between gender and age and religiosity and so on this huge question.
Sure. There's as you sort of mentioned earlier, and we touched on it earlier as well, but being a Christian-based podcast, we have a particular view about, and especially on this show where, you had said earlier that, people think we're crazy, but, the circles we run in, people consider us pretty crazy too.
Yeah.
But, we look at certain passages in the Bible, and more recently things have come to light, but there's some fascinating verses that I would just like to read for you, and just to see if it does anything for you, because I'm sure you've heard about people talk about the mark of the beast and things like that.
The various predictions.
Sure, yeah. And
some are quite amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one about the image of the beast, And there's a part of it that says in Revelation 13, of course, the book of Revelation, the crazy book.
That's the main one for these, yeah.
Yeah. But it says that, it says, and it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who do not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And, of course, it goes into the famous passage of it also causes both great and small, rich and poor, free and slave to be marked on the right hand or forehead, so that no one can buy, sell unless he has the mark, and, all this stuff. Now, what does that do for you as far as, because, I listened to you talk about this whole war and all of this, and we read this passage that was written, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah,
and,
I can answer that question.
Okay.
You've now highly motivated me to go and read the Book of Revelation.
Okay, good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd heard about it, but I hadn't read it fully. But my God, you've got my curiosity aroused now. Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing.
Exactly, and it really does sound like the image of the beast that would speak. And so that sounds kind of like an artificial intelligence kind of thing, where.
Excuse my ignorance, but
sure.
Who wrote the Book of Revelation?
It is thought to be written by John the Revelator back in about 95 AD is the majority consensus among scholars of when it was written. And there's other passages in like the book of Daniel that talk about humanity being analogous to clay, and it says that interestingly, and they don't mention who they are, they will mingle themselves with humans as iron will mix with clay, but they will not adhere to each other. So again, kind of alluding to this idea of humanity might start doing stuff to themselves that may not be good, and
it all fits. It's amazing.
Sure,
I can sort of sense your interest as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. Do you want to? Sort of alluded to it a little bit in the past. Do you want to get onto the theme of deism and
yeah,
sure.
I would actually like to hear your thoughts on that and how that contributes to your worldview as it comes to technology and what we've been talking about.
Okay.
And globalism and everything.
All right. So I couldn't really call myself a theist, given the evidence, but deism. Perhaps I should give some definitions, because people give different definitions to those terms. Deism is the belief of a creator, some super architect that designed the world, the universe, some hyperphysicist, if you like, who designed the laws of physics.
Sure.
So that's deism. Theism is, as I see it, is deism plus this creator is a kind of personal creator and a loving creator. Now, given that last century, what's the word? I can't remember the technical word. That the argument of evil, right? How do you account for a loving God if there's so much evil in the world?
Sure.
So that I find fairly convincing, because last century 200-300 million people died in the Second World War, and presumably tens of millions of them believed in a loving God, but they died anyway. So I'm a bit cynical that way. But deism, I'm much more open to, and I say that simply because of not despite, but because of my science. So I see the snake is sort of curling around and starting to eat its tail. I see science now sufficiently developed that it's touching more and more on, in very common, religious type questions.
Right.
Sure.
And there's, I have like three main arguments along those lines that persuade me, at least. I'll just label them first, and perhaps talk a bit about them later, but just give them labels, like in bullet form, 1, 2, 3. So the anthropic principle, you've heard of that?
Yes.
You know what that's about? Okay. Second one, I didn't really have a label for it.
Why don't you state just a brief definition for the listeners who might not be familiar?
All right. The anthropic principle, anthropo of mankind. But well, it's debatable, but let's say the two main forms of the anthropic principle, the weak form and the strong form. The strong form is much more interesting than the weak form. The weak form simply says that the universe has to exist in a way that it can be observed by observers.
Right.
Because if it weren't, we, human beings, we would not be here to observe the universe.
Right, yeah.
Right, so virtually everyone agrees with that. So it's almost like a truism. That's there's hardly anyone who disagrees with that.
Sure.
That's the weak form. Now the strong form is much more interesting, and I find it extremely persuasive, just because of the numbers are just so fantastic. The strong form says that the values of the constants used in the laws of physics are so fantastically, improbably, finely tuned to allow the existence of matter and life, that the deep suspicion is that the whole thing has been engineered. It's been designed.
Right.
It's been rigged by, obviously by a designer, by a deity. Right? Now, let me give you some of the numbers because they're just amazing. The values of some, for example, the charge on the electron, the gravitational constant, speed of light, blah, blah, blah. There are lots of things. Some of them you can vary by, 1%, 10%, and it doesn't make a lot of difference. Like to make an analogy, one of the reasons why the AK-47 was so popular is that you could get dirt in it. It was just so incredibly reliable. It would work no matter what you did with it, right?
Right.
It had such a wide parameter range of operating conditions that it would always work. Well, some parameters in laws of physics are like that. You can change the values over a wide range, and you still get pretty much the same kind of universe that we exist. But at the other extreme, there are some parameters in values of the constants in the laws of physics that have to be accurate to one part in something like, I think the most extreme case I ever saw was it has to be accurate to 1 part in 10 to the power 120.
Yeah. Just an astronomical number.
That's such a huge number. There's just no way you could get a universe to be that accurate, spot on to that level of accuracy by chance.
Sure.
If you're tossing die to create a zillion different universes with zillion different parameter values in the laws of physics, the chance is just so fantastically against it that you become deeply suspicious. The whole thing's been designed.
Sure. It's sort of like the teleological argument as well. I think it's pretty close.
Indeed, sure. So I call, it doesn't, I just call, oh, sorry, that's the first one. That's the anthropic principle. Okay, the second one. Now, there's no, as far as I know, there's no label for it, so I just had to invent one. So I just call it the mathematical principle. And what I mean by that is, it comes out of the question, why on earth is the universe so mathematical?
Right.
Why is that?
Right. Yeah.
Where'd that come from? Like, for example, you go back a century or so, there was a Russian chemist, and he was fiddling around with what he knew about all the different elements, like hydrogen and helium and so on. And he had the descriptions of each element on one little card, like a playing card. And he's trying to find patterns in the properties of all these different elements. And after a while, if he ranked them by weight, because you have very light atoms like hydrogen, helium, they're very light, and you have very heavy elements like uranium and so on. That's the heaviest one. So he ranked all the known elements that he knew at the time, I don't know, 50, 60 of them, whatever. And the other ones were... He noticed a pattern, like every eighth one had similar properties, like they were all metals, or they were all gases, or whatever, or they would all conduct electricity. So he created this table that had this periodicity, like every eighth one seemed to belong in the same family. So he created this periodic table, because of the periodicity.
Right.
Now, jump ahead a century, and you've got so many so-called elementary particles that the same process happens all over again. And this time, it's not Mendeleev, the Russian; it's an American guy called Gell-Mann, Murray Gell-Mann, a particle physicist. And he classifies the elementary particles, but not in terms of their, indirectly, not in terms of their weight or whether they're metals or whatever, but more abstract properties that elementary particles have, like their charge, mass, and spin, and whatnot. And he chooses two properties. I won't say what that gets a bit technical, but he chooses two properties that all these particles have, and he starts and he'll take one particle and he put it in. Imagine these two properties. They're numbers. They're different valued numbers. So imagine an axis, like an x-axis and a y-axis, right? The horizontal axis and the vertical axis. And he takes one element and he looks at the values of these two numbers, these two properties, and he puts that particle at the coordinates, the xy coordinates, and then he takes the next two, and he notices their coordinates leaves, now we've got three particles of position, and they're in a triangle. He's got a triangle, and then he takes the next three, and my God, he gets the triangle again, but now with six points in the triangle. And then the next four, and they too are in a triangle. So you got, at the top level you got one, the second level you got two, and the third level you got three, and the fourth level you got four. So this mathematical pattern, which comes out of an obscure branch of graduate level pure mathematiks called Lie algebras. Now, don't worry about the details. Just the main point is, why on earth can you classify the elementary particles that are used to make up everything? All the atoms. You assemble all the different elements from these elementary particles. They're like the building blocks of matter. Why on earth should they be classifiable using this obscure branch of mathematics called Lie algebras? Where the hell did that come from? So this and well, I'll give you one other example. It's even more modern, because that was in the 1960s. And now in the 1990s, have you heard of something called string theory?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Have you heard of something called group theory? What's your background, by the way? What do you two study?
We are amateur science enthusiasts, among other things.
I studied sociology in college.
All right. Now, your audience, your listeners, what's their background, more or less?
The show, we are very interested in all these sorts of things. I mean, a lot of what we've talked about today, we've actually done other episodes on that are supplementary to this. But along the lines of string theory and group theory and chaos theory and all those things, we haven't exactly done pieces on yet. My suspicion is that if they're listening to this show, a lot of them are familiar with at least the very elementary
principles
and information about the thing. So you talk it in basic terms, most of us will be able to follow with you.
All right. So when I was talking about that triangle at that level, would that be about right?
That is just about where I'm able to follow you. Yep.
Okay. Well, this next one, I'll keep it at that level.
Okay.
All right. Now, in string theory, what's string theory all about? That's trying to wed the two major physics revolutions of the 20th century. There was Einstein's general relativity, theory of gravity, on the one hand, and quantum mechanics on the other. And 70s, 80s, so-called string theory came around, and to make it work, the theory showed that the number of dimensions, spatial dimensions that the theory had to exist in, was either 26 or 10.
Right.
Now, that's string theory. That's on one side. Now, on the other side, there's something in group theory. They're all different kinds. What's a group? It's a special kind of set with certain properties. What's a set? Oh, just a collection of things. Having a bit of trouble here. Okay, so group theory. It's a branch of pure mathematics. It's very beautiful. Has wonderful structure, and gets applied in physics a lot. Because group, this Lie algebra stuff, that was group theory that got used to classify the elementary particles. But in the 90s, something even more spectacular happened. Now, there's a type of group called a simple group. Now, it's not simple in the sense it's easy to understand. In fact, it's graduate level. In my role as a Globicator, I will be teaching this stuff in my YouTube lecture videos in the fairly near future. There's something called a simple group. Now, it's not simple to understand, but it's simple in the sense that you can't break it down into components anymore. It's sort of like analogous to, say, a prime number. You can take any integer, and there's a famous theorem says that you can break it down into a product of prime numbers, like 35, that's 7 times 5, and those two numbers are primes. So a simple group is a type of group that you cannot break down. You can't disassemble it into small, simpler forms. It's as basic as it can get. It's called a simple group. And one of the greatest achievements in pure math, and for humanity as a whole, but most people don't recognize because it's sort of, it's pure math. Most people don't care. But anyway, in the 80s, one of humanity's greatest achievements was to classify, in other words, list all possible simple groups, and starting from quite small ones and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and until they got to one that was so big it had something like 10 to the power 53 members in the group. Now, group's just a set, right? A set of things, set of elements, and this group was so large it had 10 to the power 53, and so this particular group got labelled, not surprisingly, the monster group, because it's just so huge. And for decades, it was just how can you say? It was a kind of an anomaly, right? It was an amusing piece of abstruse, obscure, pure mathematics that the mathematicians loved playing around with it, because it's a beautiful piece of math. But that's all it was. And then along comes this Cambridge University genius mathematician and shows that there's a link between this monster group and 26-dimensional string theory.
Yeah.
In other words, the mathematics of this particular kind of string theory was the monster group.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And so I'm thinking, my God, the creator, the God, is a superb mathematician.
Right.
Whatever, is using the largest possible simple group to construct the universe, the string theory, which describes the whole universe.
Wow.
So, and that's just two examples. There's a string of others. So more and more, the mathematician physicist in me, because that's what I teach, is becoming increasingly convinced, just from my knowledge of science and knowledge of math, that the universe has been designed by a superb mathematician. So this godlike mathematician, and this conviction is getting stronger and stronger. Now I can't be sure, of course. So people describe me as an agnostic, and I guess that's probably the best, most accurate label. I don't think I'm a theist, but I'm certainly open to deism. Okay, so that's the second argument. So we've done the anthropic principle, the mathematical principle, and now there's this third one. And now a lot of people have said that God is a mathematician. That's been around for centuries.
Sure.
So that's not exactly original. But this third one, I think I can claim from me. One of my research interests is looking into the possibility that there might be, into the future, femtotech. Now, you've heard of nanotech. The time we're living in now, we're moving down in scale from microtech, like microwave ovens, and from microtech, a millionth of a meter, to nanotech. That's a billionth of a meter. So
Right.
a billionth of a meter. That's the scale of molecules, right? So nanotech or nanometer technology, nanometer scale technology. That's little machines the size of molecules. Right? Like little machines, like little robots that can pick up one atom from here and put us there.
At this point, we actually lost the connection to Dr. Hugo de Garis. However, we were able to jump back on, and part of the recording software didn't catch some of the stuff that he was talking about there. But we'll pick it up where we came back in. Basically, the only thing you missed in between was he was talking about nanotech, which is a billionth of a meter. Then he went and talked about picotech, which is a trillionth of a meter. And then he moved into talking about femtotech, which is a quadrillionth of a meter. So that's where we will pick it up, at femtotech.
Okay, so let's see, where was I? So femtotech could outperform nanotech by a factor of 1 trillion.
Right.
And then the way I dreamt up of how to compute using quarks and gluons, I did the same kind of thing. The ideas were basically the same, but using these weak force particles, W's and Z's and so on, and they exist. Their range is like 1,000 times smaller than femto, and that level is called atto, A-T-T-O, attotech. So it dreamt up an attotech for computing, an atto computing. So you can work out if there were an attotech, like an atto engineering as well.
Sure.
I haven't even started thinking about that yet. But so I think, let's see. So the density would be 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000. So that's 1,000,000 times. And then everything would be 1,000 times closer together. So the signaling speed would be 1,000 times more. So attotech could outperform femtotech by 1,000 to the fourth power. 1,000. So what's that? A million. That's 1 trillion.
Wow.
Now the next one after that is Zepto. Z-E-P-T-O. Zepto. Now, I don't know anything in physics at that scale, so I just sort of gave up. But it was interesting. There was a trend. There was a definite trend, right? You're going from scale to scale, level to level. And so then I asked myself, well, what's the smallest scale that humanity has even thought about? And the answer is Planck tech. At the Planck scale, Planck length, Planck time. The Planck length is 10 to minus 35 of a meter.
Wow.
Now, a femtometer is 10 to minus 15, right? So the Planck scale is hugely smaller. So dreamt up the term Planck tech. So that's one of my life goals, is to use string theory and dream up a way to compute and to do engineering at the Planck scale. Okay, now you're probably starting to sense where I'm getting into deism and all this stuff. Okay. All right. Have you heard of something called the Fermi paradox?
I'm not familiar.
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, okay. Well, the Fermi paradox is interesting. You've probably heard of SETI, right? S-E-T-I.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the main intellectual conceptual challenge to SETI is Fermi's question. Fermi was an Italian-American nuclear physicist, and he helped in the development of the nuclear bomb in the Second World War. I mean, his wife was Jewish, and he went to Sweden to pick up a Nobel Prize, and then he did not go back to Italy. He went straight to America, and then he helped develop the bomb. So in the 50s, after the war, he was having a conversation with some of his friends in a research lab somewhere, and the friends were talking about SETI, the whole idea of using 50s. I might have
it might be late 40s. It looks like he passed away in 54. So it could be the 50s.
Oh, you're Googling.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, so early 50s, he's in the lunch cafeteria or something. He's having a bit of a chat with some of his colleagues and friends. And he made a remark that is sort of critical. And he's saying, okay, well, imagine that out in the universe, with there's trillion stars and hundreds of billions of galaxies and so on, and the laws of physics are the same throughout the whole universe, and virtually every star, as we know now, nearly every star has planets. So the probability of there being highly intelligent life forms out there is virtually certain, right? There are probably zillions of these intelligent life forms. Okay, obvious question. Where are they? Why is there not a single shred of evidence of their existence?
I do know this argument now. I didn't know it was called Fermi's problem or Fermi's paradox. Yeah, but I have heard the argument.
You've heard of it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now the SETI guys, their main argument is that let's use radio telescopes to try to detect and transmit radio signals to and from other advanced civilizations, that are smart enough. They've been through the whole Darwinian evolutionary process, and they've gone from single cells to multicellular creatures to intelligent creatures with brains and consciousness and language, and then science, and then technology, and so on. So the SETI people, SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They've been looking for decades, found nothing.
Right.
And my cynical reply to them is, you may be looking in the wrong direction, the wrong way. Maybe SETI is not the way to go. Maybe, just maybe, I may be way wrong, of course, but maybe the way to go is SIPI, 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 and that stands for Search for Infra, that means within, right? Infra particle intelligence.
Interesting.
Would a term that people might be able to grasp, could it be termed like interdimensional, perhaps?
Well, yeah. Well, for me, just a label, right?
Right. Well, I'm trying to.
Yeah, you could.
Okay.
But I just for fun a couple of days ago, I just typed in SIPI just to see what the hit count was on Google, and thousands.
Oh,
or
wow.
hundreds.
Okay.
I can't remember. Anyway, hundreds of thousands. I was surprised. There's a hell of a lot more than I thought. So the idea seems to be catching on. Anyway, you can see the argument, right? So it's quite possible that at these tiny scales, as you get smaller, you get faster, right? So I can imagine that if humanity does decide to build these Artilects, then very probably they would be nanotech based, because that's all humanity can do at the moment, right? Nanotech. They'll probably be quantum computers. Do you know what that is, sort of?
Yeah. We've touched on it. Yeah.
Okay, so the capacities would be just huge, exponentially greater than what classical computers can do. Like today's computers basically can only do one thing at a time, but a quantum computer can do exponentially more at the same time than a classical computer. So I can imagine these Artilects, if humanity decides to build them, would be nanotech-based and quantum computers. But now, if they can think a million times faster and they're really smart and hugely smarter than humans, then obviously they would pretty quickly discover that they could reach vastly superior performance levels if they scaled down. They went to smaller scales. So then they would go from femto level to they'd go from nano level to femto level. So instead. So a nanometer scale Artilect, I coined a term for that. I just call them nanolects, right? And so you'd have femtolects, and then there'd be attolects, and so on. So you can imagine that if you think about the big picture, the way the Cosmists look at the world, there's a trillion stars out there, and most of them are billions of years older than ours, right? Our sun. And assume that we know the laws of physics are the same throughout the universe. Trillion stars, maybe a tenth of the planets. Water is not steam. It's not so hot; it's a gas. It's not so cold; it's rock solid ice. So life is commonplace throughout the universe. It's like zillions and zillions of planets have life. And a certain fraction of those, of course, would end up being intelligent, and then they would transition from biological to intellectual, right? They'd make this transition into massive artificial intelligence. And then they would probably learn to scale down. They would scale down. And so here's the punchline. The answer, my view, the answer to the Fermi paradox, this critical question, where are they, is simply they are everywhere, but they're too tiny to see.
Yeah.
And they don't bother contacting us because we're just massively too primitive. We're like a zillion times too primitive. It'd be like human beings trying to communicate with a rock, right? I mean, a rock actually communicates, can change its form over millions of years as it decays, but no human's going to bother. So that's my answer to Fermi's paradox, and it connects with deism, because if these hyper creatures that are all over the universe, if they're like at the moment, humanity hasn't a clue what goes on at the bottom of a black hole. It's just beyond human knowledge. The density becomes so great, effectively, with the theories we have now. It's just the density of the matter becomes infinite. Now, when you get infinities in physics, that means you've lost your theory. Your theory no longer works. Right? It's failed. And so the inside of a black hole at the singularity. And in fact, that's where the word singularity with artificial intelligence came from. It was by analogy with physics. Right. So inside of the center of a black hole is a singularity. It means that the density there is infinite. It's just so great. So we need new physics to describe what's going on there. Right. So there may be a link. Maybe who knows where these godlike hyper creatures, these zeptolects and attolects and planklects, what are they doing? Where are they? What sort of things are they doing with themselves? So it seems to me, looking at the future potential of what these Artilects could do with their science is just godlike, right? Just veritably godlike. So any Terran who comes along and says, "No, there's no way you're going to do this," then I can imagine the Cosmists reacting with passion. Passion. Say, "You're not going to stop this. This is the destiny of the human species. This is where humanity has to go. This is the next rung up the ladder of evolution." And they get really passionate about it. And orators and philosophers will get out there and harangue the crowds, stir people. This is the way we have to go. And then the Terrans getting out their machine guns and saying, "You exterminable monsters, you're prepared to kill off the human species. That means my family and me."
Right.
It's just going to be so passionate that frankly, I'm 67. I'm hoping, because my father's old, he's 94, and nothing wrong with him. So I think I've got his longevity genes. I'm hoping to get into the 90s. So that will be long enough, I'm calculating, that will be long enough for me to see the debate. I'll definitely live and see this debate raging. And in fact, I see it coming. Late teens. It'll be this decade, at least amongst the educated level of people.
Right.
I see it going mainstream in the 20s and raging in the 30s. Now, I'll probably still be alive, but unless there's some radical changes in longevity technology that'll live longer, they'll get all my cells cleaned out or whatever. But assuming that's a really tough problem that doesn't. If I take a rather, what's his name? The British guy with the long beard. What's he?
Oh yeah, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but I know who you're talking about.
I should know. I just tip of the tongue. Anyway, so assuming that his big dream of making humanity immortal.
Oh, Aubrey de Grey?
Yeah, Aubrey. Yeah, right. Yeah, I know him. So assuming that that task is harder than we thought and takes a few more decades longer than we thought, so that means I'll probably die in my 90s. So I've got, I don't know, 25 years, maybe 30 years more. That will probably be long enough for me to see the debate, but I will not see the Artilect War. Now, do you know the name Ben Goertzel? He's one of the Humanity Plus guys. Do you know the name?
The name kind of sounds familiar, but I'm not familiar with his writings or anything.
Well, he was president. I think he's now vice president of Humanity Plus. So he's coming out. He and his father, in fact, are coming out with a book of essays, and the theme of all the essays in the book is like the lead up to the Artilect or the singularity. Use American term. By the way, is there a difference? Americans use, as I see it, the term singularity at least in two ways. One is the historical era in which technology advances so fast that ordinary humans can't keep up. Right? So it's a label of a historical era. Mm-hmm. And the second meaning is just the machine, the artificial intelligence machine. Right. Whereas I don't talk much about the historical era and give it a label. I just concentrate on the machine itself.
Right.
And instead of using the term singularity, I just use the term Artilect. So if you hear the term Artilect, it's specifically about a machine. It's talking about an ultra-intelligent machine. And so if I talk about the historical era, then, well, maybe I'd use the term singularity.
Sure, yeah. I think Ray Kurzweil, who you've debated, uses both as well as far as the singularity or the technological singularity as a more specific way to, right. I think, more relatable to the Artilect.
Okay. So I see the Artilects coming into being. The critical breakthrough is going to have, in my view, Ben Goertzel is a good friend of mine. He would disagree because he's taking the engineering approach to building what's his term? AGI, artificial general intelligence. Mm-hmm. Like AI, artificial intelligence today, it's really a bunch of narrow focused techniques like Google and AI routing of cell phone calls and optimization and signature checking on checks, stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of very narrow focused techniques, but AGI would be general intelligence. So it would be putting general intelligence into machines, so this machine could solve a broad range of different problems. It wouldn't be very narrow and specific, like driving a car automatically, having a computer control the driving of a car. That's a very specific application, whereas AGI is very general. Now, sure. So he's a good friend of mine, Ben Goertzel. His approach to doing that, to creating AGI, is engineering. He just does whatever he likes. He has this big book, Building Better Minds, or maybe he changed the title recently. But so he just takes the ideas from this book and implements them. He's got a team in Hong Kong, and he's trying to do that right now. Now, that's one broad approach that I label simply the engineering approach. Now, there's another approach, and that's Kurzweil and I and others agree on. On the technological side, I tend to be very much in agreement with Ray Kurzweil, but on the political side, not at all. It's sort of polar opposites. He's a real optimist, and I'm Artilect War, the opposite extreme. Anyway, so they're the two broad approaches, and the second approach is copy the brain. You just learn as much as you can about how the brain, our biological brain, works. What is memory? How's a decision made? What's the architecture of the brain? What's the microcircuitry of the human brain? All this stuff. So as these neuroscience principles become discovered, just put them into the machines. So you can imagine increasingly a kind of wedding between neuroscience, neurophysiology, neuroscience, and on the other hand, neuroengineering. So in time, with all the massive electronics capacity that, with Moore's law keeps increasing all the time, pretty soon, just a few years, the neuroscience guys will be testing their theories on how the brain works using machines. They will be able to use programmable machines to you can program the wiring up of the circuitry and test their hypotheses using machines. That will be well advanced by the end of this decade because it's already well on the way.
Right.
So we'll have these fabulous machines.
Sure.
Now,
we're kind of running out of time here, so we want to wrap it up real quickly. But just one last question for you, and we can be brief about it. But should you? And you were talking about, you wanted to live into your 90s and see this, some of this debating and some of your theories unfold. If you had the opportunity to take, you were talking about a grain of sand earlier, that can, give you infinite life and all this kind of stuff. Would you take that grain of sand?
I would be the first, but I'd probably be the millionth.
So you would need more proof.
Actually, I haven't committed myself, right? I didn't say whether personally I'm Terran or Cosmist or Cyborgist. Yeah. I might be Cyborgist, but I wouldn't be the first. I'm definitely Cosmist. I think it would be a cosmic tragedy if humanity chooses to freeze evolution at a current puny level. As human beings, we're just nothing. We were just snuffed out in a mere 80 years.
Sure.
It's just nothing in a universe that's billions of years old. So at a very deep level, definitely Cosmist.
Sure. And
possibly Cyborgist. Because if you're a Cyborgist, you're effectively a Cosmist anyway.
Sure.
Because the two are virtually the same.
I do want to tell you that it's interesting from our perspective, again, as Christians, because we do believe in sort of a same ends, if you will. It's just how to get there. And, we believe in a supernatural God that, with faith in Jesus, that there is eternal life. And even the Bible even actually interestingly talks about we will be given these immortal bodies. The mortal has to put on immortality and things like that. So it's interesting that there is a overlap as far as the ultimate goal here and the ultimate understanding of.
Yeah, I see science, closing the loop and getting back to traditional theological questions in religion. Like, for example, personally, I'm reading Aquinas.
Interesting.
Because some of the deep questions he talks about are now being approached by particle physics and astrophysics, and so and a lot of former atheists are really coming around now. They're much more, deism at least. I mean, I know from reading a bit of history, I know that. That's what I read. Most of the founding fathers of the U.S., they were deists.
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
they're strongly influenced by French Enlightenment and the Renaissance and everything. So, they're probably a bit like me, a bit cynical on the theistic side, the loving God. Right. But most of them, I read, were deists. So, and that attitude now is I see a real what's the word? renaissance, a rebirth amongst the former atheist physicists and so on, like the creative, what's the word, creationists. I think they're harping on the wrong horse. They're betting on the wrong horse, trying to discredit Darwinism. I think that's probably not the way to go. I'm very phase too strong. I'm very open to intelligent design as a deist, but not using biology, but by using physics, using particle physics and astrophysics.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
The anthropic principle and the mathematical principle, and let me finish the third one. I didn't quite finish. I'll tie that up quickly. These hyper civilizations out there that are billions of years older than we are, and they're tiny. They're really tiny and hugely performant. They're so vastly superior to us that just maybe for them to design and create a universe, maybe chicken feed, maybe nothing to them. So if these artilects of the future, and not too distant future, if they're capable of designing and building universes, then who's to say that our universe is the product of some other hyper Artilect of the past?
Right.
It's a possibility. So if Artilects can build universes and hence become, and by definition, become gods, well, then the whole notion of a deity, a universe creator, becomes so much more plausible. In fact, personally, I'd like to see scientists look into the possibility of SIPI, that instead of the laws of nature just being given, we could have a real paradigm shift and start seeing the laws of nature as engineered.
Right.
Now, when you start thinking in those terms, religious questions and science questions, they sort of merge. So I can imagine if somehow, and it's a big if, but if somehow science could get its hooks into, if it could scientifically show the existence of hyper intelligent creatures that actually designed the universe. Now, there's all kinds of metaphysics here, of course. It's difficult stuff.
Sure.
But imagine somehow it could be done that science could get its hooks, its methods into the showing the existence of these universe-creating hyper creatures. That would be wonderful for science. That would explode science. Its horizons would open up, in vastly greater scale. So, that's sort of maybe a good point to stop. But that's sort of where I am at the moment. I'm just more and more open to deism, based on the possibilities of future technologies and future physics.
Very cool.
So I see the high priests, if you like, of the 21st century are mathematical physicists.
Well, Dr. Hugo de Garis, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has definitely been a mind-blowing, mind-melting, just a very interesting talk with you today, and I'm so glad that we overcame our technical challenges to make this happen. Now, where can we find your work or your videos or things like that?
Okay. Well, everyone nowadays has a website, I guess. So my website URL is, the usual http:// Prof. Hugo de Garis. That's all one word. So Prof, short for professor. So PROF, and then my first name, personal name, Hugo, like Victor Hugo, Hugo, and then family name, it's sort of a Frenchy sounding name, so DE, and then Garis, Garis. So, and that's all one word, so I'll just spell it out. Prof. Hugo de Garis, PROF, HUGO, DE, GARIS, Prof. Hugo de Garis.
There we go.
It's URL. WordPress.com. So WordPress, WORDPRESS, WordPress.com. ProfHugodeGaris.wordpress.com. And there's a ton of stuff there. There are videos galore. There's all my YouTube lectures. There's an electronic library. That's just part of my effort to try to educate the world for free.
Whew. So there you go, everybody. I hope that you are still
alive.
That was some very, very dense information, a lot of that. But, I think it was a very good conversation. It was interesting to hear it from somebody's side who is a self-proclaimed cosmist and avid globist.
But I love the fact that he was open-minded enough to consider different possibilities, and that's a good indicator that, it's not this black and white sort of,
right,
battle between ideas. There are people out there willing to explore some things. So
right. And I love how he points out in so many words that science now is really pointing towards the strong possibility of a creator.
Yeah, well, one step in that direction. So that's cool. I think that's interesting thing from someone in science, deeply in the sciences.
Science. Yeah, so make sure to go check out more of his stuff. I'm sure there's lots of good scientific learnings for you to accomplish on his website. I did think it was interesting how sort of the only stereotype that he would give of the Terrans is like militant, like conservative extremists.
Conservative evangelical Christians with guns.
Well, he didn't exactly say that, but yes, it was very much a militant faction being the human beings, which I could see in sort of in a narrative sense. Like if you're trying to think up the story of what's going to happen, that's a pretty go-to archetype to have.
Sure. I think there's going to be a lot of people that are in between, sort of, they don't necessarily, they might be victims to the conversation, but...
Yeah, and I could see, peaceful Terrans going off into the forest and living the human life, or something like that.
Right, sort of a neo version of the Amish.
Sure, yes. Where the technology that they shun is not so much automobiles or televisions, but grains of sand that boost your intelligence by just octillions. Yeah, exactly. So, all right, everybody. Well, before we go, make sure to go to iTunes and leave us an awesome review, or not, if you don't want to. But either way. But you can find us on iTunes. Most of you are listening to us from there. You can also give us thumbs up on Stitcher. You can go to Facebook, leave a message, say what's up, maybe a little comment on something, say hi, like our Facebook page. That's a big thing nowadays with the youngsters. What else we got? We got a Twitter.
that doesn't get used very often.
Well, you can just... I don't know. Go do that.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff. We're all over the place. So just make sure to connect with us, say hi, and let everybody else know what's going on. So, just to mention it again, there is a support tab on the website. And if you find that Canary Cry Radio at all adds any value to your life or your worldview or your faith or your scientific prowess, you can go ahead and, just show your support in that way, because we do appreciate it, and we are more and more, as our personal economy drops, needing to use that support for the website and also to keep roofs over the heads of little Gonz and I. All right, so I think that's about it, eh?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, just a quick shout out to all of our international listeners. What's up, everybody? Also, America, you're cool too, still. Don't worry. Okay,
Not
make sure
according-
to... Well, yeah, I know. Let's
Let's just bask in the glory while we can.
Let's leave that sleeping dragon live for a little longer. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to catch the next episode of Canary Cry Radio. And until then, think outside the cage. What is the word I'm looking for? Edit this part.